I understand custom software is expensive. So I'm not one of those guys who's like, every 2 years, you got to go.
Mhm.
No, if it's working, fine. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Biz Dev Podcast, the podcast about developing your business. I am David Baxter, your host, and I am joined, as always, by my co-host, Gary Voigt, the amateur penguin wrangler. Eh?
Penguin
Eh?
wrangler. Okay.
Penguin
Do I
wrangler.
get cute little
Eh?
lassos?
Yes,
And
and
then
they have to
slide
be
them
black and
back
white.
across the ice?
And
Okay.
here's a
Well,
little
then they'll
bit.
get
So
lost. They'll be camouflage.
penguins are my favorite animal. This is Jumanji. Those who can't see my camera, I am holding up a stuffed penguin. Jumanji has been with me in every job I have had since I left school. So he sits on my desk. I studied penguins in third grade, and they have been my favorite animal ever since. Strangely enough, I was going through some of my stuff at my parents' house. I was helping them clean things up. And I found my penguin project from third grade.
Oh,
That,
wow.
yeah, like, wow, crazy. Um, Did you know? Have you ever heard what the sound a penguin makes?
Yeah. I've been
It's like this
inside the,
blood curdling honk.
yeah,
It's
I've
not
been
a pretty
inside the
sound.
penguin experience in SeaWorld.
Nice.
What was it? The Arctic Adventure or Antarctic
Uh
Adventure,
huh.
whatever, which one.
Yeah,
But yeah.
my wife knows that if there's a zoo that has a penguins, which is pretty rare because they take a lot of infrastructure, but if there is one and we go to it, I'll literally just sit in the penguin exhibit and watch them swim around for like 30 minutes. She knows I'm not leaving. I'm just going to cop a squat and watch those little idiots fly around in the water. Anyway. All right. We have already gone off the rails. We haven't even started yet.
You didn't even finish the intro yet, but that's okay. We'll
Everyone
continue.
knows why we're here, right? We're here to talk tech and startups and all the stuff in between. Right now, what my most excited about today is I get to hear Gary get really, really upset about Adobe buying Figma.
I'm not going to
That's
get
what
too
I'm
upset.
excited.
I think
You're not?
my
Did you take your
my
Valium or
anger
something?
has waned a little bit. Well, I wouldn't even call it anger at first. Yeah, for those who don't know, we are talking about Adobe's plan to acquire Figma after Figma was literally created to be the anti-Adobe design product. Now, Figma is a design tool for product design. Adobe had their own version that stemmed from, Photoshop and Illustrator, and even back in the days when they had acquired Macromedia, they had Fireworks, and then basically it's a digital design tool that isn't Photoshop, which is basically a photo manipulation app that people were using for UI design. It's not Illustrator, which is a vector illustration program. It's not InDesign, which is a page layout program. It was its own different niche. Yeah, David's falling asleep. But anyways, so Figma
Just means get there faster.
started out like the little punk rock company they were, their DIY solution to make design in the browser accessible to just about anybody for free, and then also have collaboration within it. Started off kind of clunky. Adobe made XD, which was kind of adopted a little bit quicker because everybody was familiar with the Adobe, ethos and how to use those programs. So it fit along in that family. But pretty soon, Figma just started getting more users. They started getting the attention of better developers, better engineers, and the community just grew and grew. The product grew, and they outpaced everybody in the space. Even, pro apps like Sketch, InVision had an app at one point. Um, it put XD to shame. And Adobe was even offering updates to XD. Every month we're going to make new features, and they were trying to keep pace with Figma, and they just got blown away. So at this point, what does a giant, huge company who's charging way too much per month for mediocre software do? Just buy the competition. Yeah.
Well, I always consider Figma. I'm not a design guy, so I only use it when Gary tells me to use it. Uh, I equate it as Google Docs for design people because its big thing is you can all be in the same gizmo and stare at it and that was Google Docs' big claim to fame is we could all edit the same doc together. Even though I've never understood why anyone wanted to do that, we can't all write at the same time. That's just weird. But for design, it makes a lot more sense. It's very cool. If you can get a free account. It's very neat. I am all for it because as much as I love competition, And I love the fact that Adobe had to raise their game because they tried. XD, it
They
was an
tried.
answer to a product. And XD for a while was really great because it
Yeah.
could do things that Photoshop could do. But Figma obviously whooped its booty. But I do love the idea of a startup guy. And I don't know who they were specifically, but they got one heck of a payday. So 20 billion bucks. So were they, do you know the people who started, were they like serial entrepreneurs and they were big rich guys themselves, or was this a scrappy startup team?
No, it was a scrappy startup team. Dylan Field is the CEO of Figma. Um, and their roots were
See a
small.
buddy of
They got
yours?
some, investment money or whatever. They trying to figure out how to make money, past subscriptions. Cause at first they didn't really have a subscription model. It was all just kind of free and they were just getting investment money. And
Hmm.
as their community was growing, I mean, some people were a little upset with Figma because as you became a member, some of your data and information was part of the product that they were then selling off, you know,
Yeah,
just like
make money off
any
your
other
data.
free app does. But then they
And
started like different tiers of subscription for bigger groups of people using it, teams and stuff like that. And you had a little bit more advanced features. Like you can create design systems and publish them as libraries across different, teams and platforms and have collaboration between designer, developer, and like client all in the same like set of
well, that's how we use it.
design
Yeah.
apps. Yeah. And I mean, they had it down to where if you had a design system library built and then you were making changes, you could branch that off into like your, I guess what we would call it, like your testing server or whatever before it actually went live. And then you just push it through. And then the developers would just have to make the specific changes that were made. And you know what I mean? It was just a very streamlined and I would say fast and common sense approach to uniting the creative design part of developing software to the development of the software and then the managing of both together. Like it just
What I
it
think
just seemed to be the answer for most teams.
I'm most nervous about, because when Adobeizes, I just made that up. When they do what they do to the products they buy, they often put everything, they sell a monthly subscription called Creative Suite. Um,
Creative, yeah, the
eh,
Creative Cloud, Creative Suite.
Creative Cloud. I mean, they've changed it a few times, but I'm afraid that the free features, like the cool thing about Figma now is we have a paid account that we bought for Gary, and Gary's our designer and he does his thing. And us as the devs and the people looking at it, we don't have to pay for it. And that
No,
seems
just gotta log
so
in.
counter Adobe. Like maybe they'll keep that. Maybe they'll say, okay, everybody has to at least have an Adobe ID and sign in so we can track you. But Gary's the only one who has to pay for it because he has a Creative Suite account or whatever. But I doubt that's what they're going to do. We'll see.
Yeah, well, I mean, they're basically trying to satiate everybody's concerns by Adobe saying that we promised to let Figma be Figma, and we're not going to do anything except offer our, immense amount of resources and expertise in trying to make Figma the best Figma can be. And they're like, we're not going
This
to
is
mess with the
Adobe we're
community.
talking
We're not
about.
going to mess with, yeah. But, 1 or 2 years
I
down the
mean, if this
road,
was
of course, it's just going to get folded into their suite and you're going to be paying a subscription, right along the side of every other Adobe. I
if
don't
this was
see it being
Microsoft, I might
standalone.
believe them. Microsoft has bought lots of companies and let them just be themselves. I will be shocked if Adobe's never done that. So we will see. All right. That wasn't enough anger. I didn't get it. I didn't feel the passion from you. That was still very meh. This is Gary excited. This is Gary happy. This is Gary angry. That's all we got. We got to get some passion in there, man. Come on,
And I just had a long day of wrangling penguins, man.
man. There's this one scrappy one. He is just all over the place. He's making me tired. I can't keep up. All right.
They kept flying out of the coop.
Macaroni penguins are
Man.
my favorite, by the way. Have you
Oh,
ever, this
they're
is,
called macaroni penguins. That's
they're
not
called
imperial
macaroni
penguins.
penguins.
Oh, okay.
No, imperial penguins are the really tall ones that are huge. They're like 3.5
S-
feet tall.
So the ones with the yellow feathers that
The
stick
little
up are called
fuzzy feathers that
macaroni.
stick, those are called
Yeah.
macaroni penguins.
Okay.
Or rock hoppers, I think is also another name for them. Anyway, I don't know all the penguins. I'm certainly not a super expert, but I was a fan and well, still love it. Anyway, we've gone again. Let's see, you get me talking about penguins.
All right, so a topic I wanted to bring up for this week was, when is it time to update or evaluate your current software and see that you might need improvements? Since we were speaking of Adobe and Figma earlier, talking about competition, updating to stay relevant, a lot of times most businesses will have a software suite or package, either something they bought or had made that works for them, has been working for them. So then they just continue to use it and work around it, or any of its, parts that are less capable than what they need. They'll find solutions outside of the app just to kind of keep business going. So if they might not necessarily be updating their custom software like they would be updating just regular, browsers or email platforms or operating systems. So in order to keep up with the more modern pace of business and the digital world, where everything now could be bought and sold from, a magical device that you keep in your pocket, um, things change. Things in the technology behind that change. Things like how you're paying for stuff, things like where your products are going to be seen, how you're going to sell them, what kind of privacy and security you need in order to make sure all that stuff stays safe and you keep the customer's security you know, in mind. But I'm sure just through some of the strategy sessions that you've had and you've talked to other businesses, what are three things you think any business owner, small business owner that has software, either out of the box or custom software, should kind of evaluate and look at to see if it's worth updating or adding new features to help their business processes? Are there any
I
common
think
themes that you see?
I think when it comes to software, there's a couple of things that you have to do all the time, or you're gonna run into problems, which as things update, you need to stay up with those updates. If you have a mobile app, iOS and Android, they update every year, and your app has to at least go through some sort of cursorial, that's a new word, a check to see, do I still work? Because a lot of times
Yeah,
they
they
think,
have to
oh,
still
it
work
just works.
in
And when you're
in
thinking
operating
about
systems.
building a modern app, I paid this much for it. That's all I should pay for it. That's not how that works. So that's an easy one. But when it comes to internal software, if it's only your internal team using it, the question becomes, can you still develop on it? A lot of times that software gets so old. We're talking 6+ years. That's a long time in software land, that the number of people you can find to support said stack is going to get harder. If you are on a really old stack, I'd say every 5 years, you need to kind of really do a deep dive on what kind of upgrades. They're probably going to be somewhat substantial, but if you don't do them, then you're going to be stuck in a place where a developer could take advantage because they're the only ones who know the product and the only ones who are going to learn it. That's a horrible place to be in. Or the proverbial bust happens and that developer's gone for some reason. And now you're really holding the bag of some ancient software and you're going to have to pay out the nose because not many people write that.
Yeah,
That
and I'm sure
happens.
a common solution that some of these businesses find for that is just, don't fix it if it's not broken. Just patch, 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 and get it working for a little while until we figure something else out, just to keep business going.
Oh, that is very
And I'm
common.
sure
And you
fixing
build eventually.
the leaks in the wall with duct tape eventually are just going to burst. So, what are some like common sense
Eventually, you
ways
make
that
the
they could assess what they need every 5 years?
eventually you build what I call the Franken beast, which
Yeah, yeah,
is you
you
built the
said that
core
before.
thing and you bolt on all these other things, and you end up with this wobbly contraption that eventually breaks under its own weight, because multiple development teams or whatever have been in there and they don't have a cohesive things. And generally, that's not, if you're doing a purely internal app, that's not that big of a deal. As long as it's working fine, you're you can stretch that a bit further if it's purely internal. When you're customer facing, that customer is regularly seeing new apps and new websites and new this, that, and the other. And so if
Yeah,
yours looks old, it's going to hurt you. So when you are, I mean, the natural progression of people who like custom software. And that's a mindset, right? When it comes to business owners, there's really two types of people that I find: people who like out of the box software and can deal with the shortcomings of that. And because it's not, molded to your business. And that's fine. That's a lot of people. And then the people who really like things to be their own, and they're a custom software shop and they love it. They want their software does what they do. Some of our clients consider it a competitive advantage that I'm in a competitive industry and the other guys are buying off the shelf, and I know what those can do. And we're going to build something that's unique to us, and that's going to make us better. That's a common thing.
Yeah.
What you, what if you are that custom software kind of guy, which is generally who we're talking, you'll come to a company like ours and you'll say, "Hey, I want you to build an app or revamp this app or, wherever you are in your life cycle, um, to make my company run. I've got this custom software suite. I need that, and I want you to help me build it." Okay, great. Then modernize them. Usually signs of that are data duplication. Your poor back office staff is typing the same thing 3 times. That's a very common way that
Yeah, to
you need
3
some
different sections of the
software.
software. Yeah, to just
Or
meet
you're
3 different
running
needs.
reports
Yeah.
in 5 different places because only some of the data is shared with each other. That's another common one. But what you find is the company will come in, the development will happen, everything magically occurs, and you have this great software suite that has made your life easier on the back office. Your back office team is more efficient. They are happier generally because they're doing the stuff they love rather than the rigmarole of typing that same thing in 6 times. Um, but then once we've done that, then almost inevitably, the next phase is, well, the next pain in the butt is communicating and working with our clients. Like right now, I do X, and we email when we're done with X, we email our clients and say, "Hey, look, here's what we did. Here's proof. Here's a PDF or whatever." And out of 100 clients, we'll get 20 calls in 6 months of, "I lost my email. Can you resend me that?" And those kinds of things just eat your back office time again. And so then we build a customer portal, right? And so now we're growing, and that's a very natural flow. But I don't think what you don't want to get stuck in latest and greatest. You don't want to get stuck in bleeding edge. That's a that's an expensive hold. The bang for your buck is really small there. Um,
Right.
it doesn't matter the stack as long as you can find developers. It doesn't matter uh, it doesn't matter the language. It doesn't matter the interface. Even, I mean, as a UX guy, that pains me to say that. But if your team is liking it, then it doesn't matter. You eventually we're doing this on 2 clients right now. A year ago, Microsoft Azure, which is where a lot of our clients live, have said, "Hey, this kind of VM, virtual machine, which is a type of server up in the cloud, we are deprecating it. It's going away. We're not supporting it anymore. So you get a year." They give you plenty of time to do this. "You have a year to do something different because this is going away." And if you don't have an ongoing relationship with a devs team, that's cold water right in your veins, because
Yeah, I would imagine
they're
if you
literally
were the
turning your server off.
yeah, I would imagine if you just had your standalone app working for you without an internal team and you're just using contractors here and there to find someone to be like, "Hey, I need you to move everything off of this
Mhm.
VM or server and find a better place to put it and do it without breaking anything."
Yeah, and don't break it, right? Because this is
Yeah.
my business. This is my entire life right here, and please take care of it. So we're doing that right now with 2 of our clients, and it's not a big deal for us. We work and we're in there with them all the time. So it takes time. You have to test the crud out of it because this is prod production. But that happens. There's nothing you can do about it. AWS does it. Azure does it. They all do it because they're upgrading too, right? They are
Yeah.
changing their stuff, and the way that they do VMs now is very different than the way they did them 6 years ago when, in our case, the clients were stood up, by another
Okay.
team, not us
Just some
specifically.
definitions. So Azure
Yep.
is a series of it's like a hosting services for servers that your software would live on before it's actually sent to like a
There
if you
are
have a private server. But and prod
It's
is
a public
production
server.
and test is testing.
Mhm.
Right. Okay.
Correct. So no matter what app you build, if you have any sort of database, you have any sort of logic that has to be run, you're going to put your code up in the cloud on some sort of server. And there's really two people who do that, Amazon and Microsoft.
And
Amazon's
the
called AWS.
AWS, yeah, is Amazon's web
Yeah, that's
service.
Amazon. Amazon runs probably, I don't know the exact, it's something like 50% of the web runs on Amazon servers. That's the
Yeah,
thing, total side thing, but Amazon, big store that we all go to and buy all our stuff, does not make any of their money. That's what people just don't know. They
but
make
all
some
those
money from it,
stores
of course.
hosted on Amazon web
Correct.
servers makes their money. Yeah.
They're almost all of the profit that Amazon makes. And again, I don't know the breakdown right off the top of my head, but the majority of just cash that they just print every year, it comes from the services, the computers that they license out to everybody. That's what Amazon, that's how they can charge so little. It's because they just print money. Anyway,
That's
Microsoft
how
is
they
now
build
turning into the same
failing
thing.
rocket ships.
Well,
Sorry, little
fair enough.
Bezos
That's
jab.
separate.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's separate. Um, but Microsoft is turning into the same thing. It used to be Microsoft made all their money on Windows, right? They dominated the world for 20 years. Windows every 5 years would come out with a new version. They'd make a bazillions of dollars and we'd repeat, right? That's Windows 95 on. That's what the world was. In the last 5 or 10 years, that's make less and less money. So now they make money the same way Amazon does. Anyway, so their thing is called Azure, which is where another thing, almost every server lives on one of those two things. Google has one too, but no one cares. So production is where you live and that's where everything goes. So those things change constantly and they're like weird. This is timely, I guess. Recently, I don't know how recently, because I don't look at the timeline, but Azure has created a serverless database, which is the coolest thing. So normally when you turn on a database, you say, hey, I want it to be this big, this much RAM, this much processor, et cetera. And I'm going to pay you for holding and keeping that server for me. I'm going to pay you $200 a month.
So it's almost like you're
Um,
purchasing a hard drive, but it's just space. But like a hard
well, I
drive,
mean, it's
you would pay
space
a
and
certain
processing
amount for
power.
a
It's a
certain
computer.
size and speed and how it's going to work.
Yes. It's like you bought a new laptop and put it up in the cloud.
Right.
So, and that's no matter if you're using all of that or none of that, you
You still
pay
pay the
this
same
certain
price.
amount.
Right.
So nowadays they have serverless things that literally you say how big it can get and how small it can get. And when it gets really busy, it spins up and it literally charges you by the second, meaning it will scale up and down every second if it has to. And when it's 2 in the morning, it drops to almost nothing and you don't pay for that. It's very, very cool. I don't know what ninjas and fairy dust live to make that happen because I can't even reboot as fast as these guys spin up servers. I don't know how it works. I wish I did, but it is wild stuff. But
So that's
we are
kind
testing
of
that out with our
crazy.
clients. It's crazy.
Big Pixel builds world-class custom software and amazing apps. Our team of pros puts passion into every one of our projects. Our design-infused development leans heavily on delivering a great experience for our clients and their clients. From startups to enterprises, we can help craft your ideas into real-world products that help your business do better business.
If you don't have an active dev team thinking about this stuff, you could be left in the dust. And you should have someone on your side doing this kind of stuff, thinking about this stuff, trying to push these buttons. And say, what does this do? Right? As long as they're doing it on test, that's
Okay.
great. That's
So
what's fun.
one more question. Say if you're a small business that has your custom software built for you, you have an internal like team of developers, but
Yep.
your whole system is on a private server just within your business's network, like not up in the cloud anywhere. Is
That's
that
a horrible
good
idea.
or bad?
Yes.
Horrible idea.
Horrible.
Yeah.
Don't
So
ever
that's
do that. Horrible. That used to be the only way it was done. I mean, I'm old and that's how everything was done.
yeah.
And we've talked about that, like startups, how easy they are to set up. That's largely because that's gone away.
So that's one way
The
you
reason
can
that's
assess
horrible-
right now is that's probably time to upgrade.
That's beyond us. Generally speaking, that means you got an IT guy, right? Your IT
Okay.
guy is the guy who manages the physical server. And if he hasn't told you you should get up in the cloud, he's a bad IT guy. Fire him or fire them right now. Because anybody who tells you you need a server in your office does not have your best interest at heart. There's a hot take for you. There's just no way that they have your best interest at heart, because it used to be the only way. So we dealt with it. But now the amount of risk you have by doing that and keeping that computer in your office, that server, like an Exchange server or a file server or whatever in your back room, like you used to have. Most offices, new ones or old ones, have a little closet somewhere where you used to have a bunch of
Hmm.
computers in. That should be empty now. There should be no reason to have a computer. You should have a bunch of, I mean, if you're highly technical or something like that, yeah, I should never say never. The average business should not have a computer in a back room, because it's just not worth it. Now, some people just they don't trust the cloud, and that's fair. That's your call as a business owner. I think it's a bad call, but of course I would. Um, but that's your call. But I'm saying if your IT guy is telling you should do this, I don't think that, because they're making more money than they have to, and that's why they're doing it. That's where I've known a lot of IT guys, and they were like, "This cloud stuff kills me, but I'm doing it anyways because it's the right thing to do." That's a good IT guy. Um,
Okay.
and that's not us. I'm not selling us. We don't do IT. But if you have a computer in the back office, there's so many risks there, because if your power goes out, let's think of a simple power outage. And
Yeah,
that's
your
that's your
business
web
stops.
host, web server. Your server just went down. Literally, your website just went down. That used to be common in the early aughts, right? Where I have a server in the back room, and Spectrum Internet went down, and so my site went down. That's so in the past. Don't ever do that.
So one more question to go back to: if a small business was kind of assessing their own software, uh, I think if you can notice that, say you hire some new employees, which is hard to get right now, but they're
Yeah.
probably going to be more adept to knowing software and how to use software than in the past. And I'm saying the last 5, 10
Yep.
years, people's natural ability to just adjust and learn how to use different apps and programs and software between their phone and their computer, it's just improved tremendously. So
Sure.
if you hire a new
Especially if you
employee
hire a
that's
younger person.
looking at your internal program, even no matter it works for you, like you said earlier, if it's fine for everybody on your team, it's fine. But say you get the new guy who's like looking around, he's kind of like trying to figure out the software, you're training them on it, and immediately they're just like, well, why don't we just do this? Or why doesn't that do this? Or why can't these work together like this? And, because you're just used to how more modern software works. That might be a flag for you to say, like, okay, well, maybe it is time, if we're going to evaluate how much time it takes to train newer people in this cycle and upgrade the system to be a little bit more modern versus trying to degrade everybody's knowledge back to using something that's getting out of date
Well,
anyway.
where that becomes a problem, if you're losing people because they just don't want to use your internal stuff, that's when it's time to upgrade. It should not be because the 20-year-old thinks you're old and stupid.
Well,
That's not when
the
you do that.
20-year-old is
But
going
if
to
a
think
20,
it's harder to use your internal software, and which
yeah,
makes
and
their
eventually
job,
they might quit.
yeah, just like if they feel like, I don't even know why I'm working here. Their stuff doesn't even work. It's so old.
Yeah, I mean, if it's that bad, it's time to upgrade. But I hesitate. I mean, I understand custom software is expensive, and so I'm not one of those guys who's like every 2 years you got to go. No, if it's working, fine. But if you're hiring younger people, like it's just it's
If you're
time, and you're
growing.
getting younger
Yeah.
and younger people. If you're growing and you're finding people who are 25 years old. Here's an extreme example. So we didn't actually. This was not a client. This was a potential client. Um, these guys came to us. This is a big company, millions and millions and millions of dollars company, somewhere in Florida. They entire company ran off of a mainframe computer, old school IBM mainframe computer, green screen. And what that means is, if you're old like I am, I mean, this is predating me. The whole screen is green, the text is green, and you type, and there's no mouse because they didn't support mice, and everything was keyboard driven, and that's how you ran. That's how mainframes were from the 60s to the late 80s. Um, and their whole company ran off of this. That is an extreme this, and they came to us because they were trying to modernize. We were talking about us modernizing for them. And I was like, because the business owner said, I don't trust the cloud. The mainframe, by the way, was in their office. So rewind what I just said about all that. And I mean, just you have a $50+ million business that was
Recipe for
literally
disaster.
dependent. I mean, it just was, that's extreme. to the point where it's like, whoa, but it proves the point, right? If those younger people are seeing things they have to VPN or a lot of places you'll see where using the Adobe database to run their company. It's a very common thing, the Access database, not Adobe, sorry, Access database. Um, to run their business. And the weakness of Access is one person can be on it at one time. And that was something you
That,
dealt with a while ago, but
that
that's
doesn't even
so
make sense
unacceptable now.
today. Yeah.
Yeah. So if you're having a young person come in there like, "Hey, John, are you done with that yet?" I mean, that's you're hurting your business. And then it's probably worth the investment to upgrade that and redo that. But I'd put that off as long as you can, but at some point it will be a tipping point. Because if you're losing good employees because they're just, I'm so tired of doing this. This is so stupid. He's used to being on his phone
Yeah. I
and
was going to say,
everything's
plus
fast and slick.
with the increase of remote work these days, which it's not going to go away anytime soon.
Sure.
So, I mean, it's probably just going to expand. Uh, if it's difficult for a new employee or even a current employee to work from home because they can't get into the system through, their laptop or their computer or their phone or tablet or whatever they're using and actually do their job, that's going to be a problem moving forward as well. So even something as simple as, is your software, responsive enough to be like a progressive web app where it can scale to different devices if needed, or if even not down to a phone, but at least if it can be accessed and used properly from outside of the actual business, like
Yeah, I
as
mean,
long as it is supported to have remote work.
there's a lot of older custom software that requires you to VPN before you're allowed to use it. That's generally not necessary anymore. Um, Again, there are
VPN
extreme
means
examples where you
virtual
need,
private network, just for
yeah, in
listening.
business terms, you have to sign into this gizmo, which puts you onto the office network, which
Yeah.
then will allow you to open said software because it's internal to the network only. And so you basically have to build a connection from your house to that. That used to be the only way to do business remotely back, you know, 15, 20 years ago. But nowadays the web can be secure and you can protect your data and all of that. That that should go away. That's getting less and less common, but it still happens. You shouldn't
Yeah.
have to VPN stuff.
Now, would you
Anyway.
also, like, let's say if you were a remote worker, would you have to download something onto your
Oh yeah.
machine in order to access, or would you just be able to slide right in there and work through the browser? Is that probably a
If you're a
common thing
VPN,
now that you would download? Well, no, I mean, not if you're a
oh
VPN, but if you're
nowadays,
just, yeah,
uh,
if there's a custom
modern
software
stuff, no, you
stack
shouldn't
that
have to
doesn't
download
work
anything.
in a browser.
I haven't built a desktop app in 10 years. Like that's
So
used to be,
everything
that's
basically
what you
works in a
build.
browser.
Everything works in a browser. I mean, again, there are extreme examples. If you're building desktop apps, I mean, Adobe, like we were just talking about, is builds desktop apps.
Desktop
It's not
apps.
like they're gone, but
Right.
most business software lives in the web and should live in the web.
Yeah. Adobe, that's one of the things that some people were saying they were going to kind of take the cue from Figma, because Figma has the working in the browser thing down. Like it's extremely well. It's performing extremely well. There's not any lag or anything like that. Multiple people can work at the same time without lag. So that's something that Adobe was going to take from Figma, to go back to what we were talking about earlier, Figma and Adobe acquiring Figma. They were going to take cues from Figma on how to update a lot of their design stuff to work in the browser a lot better. Because right now it's only like pieces and parts will work in the browser, and it's a really bad experience. None
Well,
of
I
it
mean,
is.
some things like XD could probably be purely on the web and it would work fine, but you're not
It
going to
didn't.
put Photoshop up there. Well, I mean, but it could. I
Well,
mean, there's
right
nothing
now
in
they
it.
do. They're beta testing versions of like smaller, like Photoshop Lite or Photoshop Express,
Yeah.
whatever they call it,
A
like in
lot
the
of
browser.
those
But yeah,
need processor power that you can't. Now, in theory, nowadays, what you're going to see in the future is we're go. If you're old, you might remember thin clients and stuff like that, and fat clients and whatever. We're moving into a world where you could be on your phone. I mean, this is a bad example, but you can remote into a very powerful digital version of a Windows machine, and it's real time. You're just working on it, and when you're done, it goes away, and it saves your state, and you come back. That is getting more and more real, and that's what's funny is you're gonna have some really weak laptops connected to very powerful servers. I mean, gaming does this right now like crazy. You can now play a top tier Xbox game on your phone without melting your phone because it's basically playing a video. That's what's happening. And they have really high, really low latency that allows you to play the game. They're doing the same thing for computers. So I could be on a very cheap laptop that the company, buys a $500 Windows laptop, and you just log in through the internet, but you don't feel that it's slow. Does that make sense?
Yeah,
Because
it's
all
almost
the
like you're using
processor
a
power is
virtual
somewhere else.
computer that's
Yeah,
a lot faster and
that's
sharper.
getting more and more common. And so we're going through a shift. 5G plus stupid internet speeds equals new stuff. This is coming. The next few years is going to be very interesting in that regard.
Well, then
Then
that's
you add
something
on the
you should
glasses.
probably look at too. I mean, if you're running old software in your business, everything is going
For
to
sure.
start moving way more mobile and way more remote. So maybe you should kind of
Yep.
make sure that, like you said, customer facing products are all accessible through mobile devices. Any kind of sales and payments are all secured through reputable companies. Any kind of communication or interaction you have with your clients are a lot more integrated than just an email back and forth. They have a place
If
to
you're
go to
using
check on
paper,
their own
that's a good
personal
reason.
stuff. Yeah, well, if you're using paper, but
If you're using
okay,
paper, well,
so
paper's still common, but yeah, that's an
yeah, but
easy one
usually
though.
the paper is
If
also backed up. I mean, even now, most stores will, if you set up a profile with the store, even if you're shopping in the brick and mortar and you just have that email receipt or just don't print the receipt, most of them will store that. Like if they'll just store it to your profile or what's the word that I'm looking for? It's not profile, but your account. Sorry, account with that store.
you can get there. I get annoyed, totally unrelated. I get annoyed when I'm buying something like my daughter's going for her homecoming dress. And so we've been shopping. And when you buy something, you're at a department store and your only options are print, email, or both. What about none? Can I just have none? I don't want to give you my email address and I don't want to waste the paper. So how about we
That's
just
becoming
none?
super common in brick and mortar stores now too. It's like, okay,
In coffee
send
shops,
your
it's common.
email and your phone number. And it's
Yeah.
like, are those
Mhm.
required for me
I
to
don't,
continue this purchase? And no, but we really prefer to have you. And it's like, nah.
I feel like a rebel. So my office is right next to a Walgreens and I'll get little stuff. I feel like such a rebel. Do you have a Walgreens account? No. Look at me.
Sir,
I'm standing up to the man.
in this
Do
day and
you want to
age, you
give
don't
me your
have a
phone number?
Walgreens account?
Yeah.
What is wrong
No.
with
Do you
you?
have a phone number? No. Okay. I
Wait,
don't know. There's something very
you're not
satisfying
part
about
of a
that.
rewards program? You're missing out on points.
Yeah, those points things. Anyway, all right, that's a whole nother podcast I could ramble on about.
All right. So to wrap it up today, we just wanted to kind of congratulate each other, I guess, since we don't have a huge crowd and audience to say thank you to. But thank you to
High
anybody who's
five.
listened so far. Yeah. Because it marks the 1 year anniversary of our first recording of a podcast. We started September 17th of 2021. So it's been 1 year. At
Which
first,
is crazy.
when we started this, it was a way for me and David to kind of just talk to each other and get some ideas out. And immediately, David went on Google and looked up best microphone for podcasting. Found a Blue
That's how I
Yeti.
do it.
A couple of days later, it showed up at my doorstep. He had one in his office. I'm a little farther away, so it had to be mailed. And we started recording and then got an editor for the podcast that told us those microphones were garbage. So now
Well,
we're
our
on
first
to
editor
better
was my son.
microphones.
Our first editor was my son. He did not say that. Once we got rid of my son, we didn't get rid of him. We fired him. Totally fired him with extreme prejudice. Once we got the marketing team, they were like, "What are you doing? These Macs are trash." And
Yeah.
so
Well, your son
I
wasn't
bought
too
another
happy
one.
with having to take all the background noise out of the audio tracks either. So
I like the Blue Yeti. I still have it over there. I use it for D&D.
yeah,
Um,
mine's on the shelf back there too. It looks cool, but
it's a very large pill. It's
speaking of
crazy
your
to think we've
son,
been doing this a year. What's
he's
that?
also the music producer who did the music for our intro and interludes and stuff like that.
That is
So
correct. He does all of our music, which we should get. We should probably get another song now that we're a year old. We should spruce it up a bit. I'm sure we can get that happen.
yeah, or get a couple more for maybe the interludes. Put them to work.
Let's get
Use
him to
some
work.
tracks.
He just sits around all the time. Let's get him to do something productive. He actually works for our marketing company now. I'm trying to think. We started this because I got tired of writing blogs and I wanted to just talk more.
Yeah.
And we started enjoying it, and here we are. 50,
I
51
think it
episodes later,
was,
we skipped 1 week. That's right, we've skipped 1 week. That's
yeah,
pretty good.
you would write a blog and then send it to me, and then I would read it and then give you input, and then you
Uh-huh.
would write more, and then we'd have someone else edit it. And then over the course of that like month, maybe we'd have one small
Once a month.
article. And
Yep.
then we were like, why don't we just like talk to each other? Then we started having like little Zoom meetings talking about it.
Mhm.
And I think that was like, we should just record this. It's way
We should
easier
just
than
record it.
us sending the document back and forth. And I was like, let's just turn it into a podcast. And I kind of mentioned it as a joke. Like, let's just make it a podcast. And then everybody's like, yeah,
Everybody's
actually,
podcast.
okay. Why not? Let's do it as a podcast.
If you ever get bored and want to see those articles that came out very rarely, you can look up Big Pixel NC, I think, on Medium. Those are still out there. I like
Yeah.
them, but yeah, they're still out there.
Still very good
Uh,
content.
Yeah, a lot of the first episodes came from there, actually, from my dribble on Medium. I'm still killing it. I think I made 32 cents last month off of Medium.
You're a
So
professional writer then.
I'm
I sold a stock photo
professional.
on Adobe Stock for 7 cents last year. So I'm a professional photographer.
Damn. Awesome. Well, thank you all for those who have listened for an entire year, my wife included. Hi, Jen. She has been a faithful listener since day one, and I think it puts her to sleep every night. It's beautiful.
Yeah, because I'm sure that's what she wants to hear, more of your voice. Like,
More of my voice, these dulcet tones. She can't get enough of this lisp, man. I tell you, it is magical. All righty. Well, thank you all again for listening to us, and we will be back. I will not be here next week. Gary will be leading the show, so I'm sure he will go flawlessly, and he won't
we
make
will
fun of me
have
at all.
a special guest to replace you for next week.
Nice.
So
And so I'll be back in a couple of weeks.
you can always reach us, hit us up with any questions, comments, or ideas at hello@thebigpixel.net. That's our email. Or you can reach us through any of our social media channels and leave comments on our YouTube videos. So until then, we will see you next week. Later.
Thank you all, everybody.
Hi, I'm Christy Pronto, Content Marketing Director here at Big Pixel. Thank you for listening to this episode of the BizDev Podcast. We'd love to hear from you. Shoot us an email, hello@thebigpixel.net. The BizDev Podcast is produced and presented by Big Pixel. See you next week. Until then, follow us on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, Threads, YouTube, and LinkedIn.